Welcome to Calvinian architecture. This beautiful day by the Murray. Somebody told me the other day that it's the third oldest river in the world. I don't know what the first and the second oldest are, what they are, where they are, but it's good to know that. For some reason, it's comforting. 4th octave, 6th chapter, Melania. I'm reading not verse 2, it's far too long, but verse 3, and then I will read you a story from 4th octave, 7th chapter, smeraldina. This is the 3rd verse of Melania. It's trying to rain. I'm sitting in the car on the side of the highway between Warrnambool and Colac, waiting for Mr. O'Connell, who says he's the cousin of the priest that formerly worked here, now retired in Tassie in a home for priests, he says, with an audible sneer. But the church is intact, hasn't been touched. It was down to 5 or 6 people for Sunday Mass for the last 10 years. He told me all of this on the phone this morning. I've driven down and now I'm here. It's wet and cold, it's June, so I'm waiting in the car for him to arrive. The church is made of bluestone. It's smallish, with 3 spires. It's cheap though, because it's out of the way down here, says Mr. Connell. 4 confessionals too, made of Tasmanian oak. Solid as you like. As I wait, I'm going over the phone conversation in my head and I'm starting to feel a little uneasy. I think of my first communion at St Mary's in North Melbourne, opposite John Napoli's pharmacy, where my mother worked. That was the only reason my sister and I had first communion and were confirmed there. The priest had recently arrived from Italy. The whole thing affected me so deeply that I cried after my first confession, standing in front of the big crucifix in the west nave. I was so sorry and relieved to confess, but sorry for what? I can't remember now, but maybe answering my mother back too harshly perhaps, or thinking about Carol and Cattell's in the evenings when I'd sit up in my bed looking out of the dark window into the neighbour's fence. Nothing to see really, but the lights were off and I could make the shadows be anything. He's 20 minutes late now, and I wonder where he is. Suddenly I switch on the ignition, do a U-turn and leave. He has to come right on this road from Colac, and if he sees my car, as a sign of recognition, he asked me, "What do you drive?" I said, "A Volkswagen Beetle," and there was silence from the other end. I'm sure he'll know who it is that's driving out of town, but I get well into Colac and not a single car has come the other way. Something must have held him up. That's good. I feel cheerful now. I turn on the radio. It stopped raining. I feel a little like that day, actually, the day of my first confession, when I felt so light, so relieved, perhaps unburdened or just simply happy. It was all over. I remember running all the way down to Flinders Street to get the train home, past bewildered late shoppers and people going home. I was pretending to be Bill Sarong, practicing his blind turns. I'd read in a footy book, the only one available at the time, perhaps the only one then written, that he practiced his blind turns by running full pelt at 5 p.m, mind you, into the crowd streaming down Swanston Street towards the station, and then he'd spin backwards, skipping past them. Well, if only Bill had seen me then. So the Yu-Yangs are to my left now. I'm singing out loud with all the nonsense on the airwaves. I must confess, I'm feeling just a little bit sorry, a bit repentant for having made Mr. O'Connell wait, for making him wait. Trying to see the time on the screen, so I've got time to read you from the 4th octave, the 7th chapter, smeraldina. Verse 3. Sometimes when it's raining in the middle of the night, and when the next day doesn't yet hold particular terrors, then this very house is the only place I want to be in. When I can lay down and watch the shadows on the tall cactus flickering across the ceiling and listen to the cypress creaking, rubbing itself raw as it sings its song of woe to the guttering. It sounds like the strangest bird, or like a sorry human waiting and wailing a language of unfathomable loss, terror, hopelessness. Yet I always manage to go to sleep listening to it. It's the sound one might imagine that leads directly to nightmares. When I awake on hearing it, I wonder, how could I have found sleep listening to the cypress's wail? Perhaps that's why, when conditions are right, I recognize within these walls those particular qualities that make for a partner, as opposed to those that make the lover or even the friend. The partner, the one that allows its wail to be heard, that dares sing it, that dares you to hear it all, inviting you then to intone yours, knowing that after the mingling of tears, sleep is restorative, awakening a goodness. Wailing is then embedded in the making of harmony. That's why I planted so many cypresses in my house here in Mildura, hoping they have something to kind of creak up against, rub themselves up against, but I'm not sure it'll be the same, and I'll have to wait for a long time for them to do that. I'd waited that long for them to be able to express themselves in that way in my house in Northcote, and the creaking only lasted a year or two. After living there for 35 years, I don't think I have that long here in Mildura, but we'll see. I think perhaps the intent might be enough. The intent, the preparedness to hear the wailing. Which might then be embedded in the making of some kind of harmony. Tomorrow, the 4th octave, the 8th chapter, Fili.